Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Today's story is about instant karma. OP's wife is completely freaking out after she cheated on him, and then got diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that she needs medication for in order to save her life. In today's second story, OP's wife had an affair with her college professor. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. My wife of 19 years told me about her friend setting her up on a blind date. She had a girls' night out with her friend T. T set her up, apparently with a guy that she had slept with a few weeks earlier. T was hooking up with someone else and set my wife up with the past hookup. My wife went out at 7 p.m. and came home around 3 in the morning. The confession came completely out of the blue. She said she was sorry and wanted to work on our marriage. There were waterworks and lots of begging for forgiveness. She said that nothing happened between her and the guy because T had slept with him. She knew agreeing to meet the guy was wrong and going to meet him was even worse. I didn't believe that nothing happened like she said. She also said that the guy works at a sawmill and you make more money. That's why I was the better option. Basically, she was confessing to actively trying to replace me. If she had found someone with a better paying job, this post would be much different. Not long after that girls' night out and before the confession, my wife and T had a total meltdown of their friendship. Suddenly, they went from best friends to T as a liar and a manipulative jealous person according to my wife. I think the confession or partial confession was to keep T from telling me about her sleeping with the guy, gaslighting me by telling me only partially about what really happened. Only enough to look bad, but not the whole ugly truth of what happened. Honestly, I didn't need to be told everything that happened. Her story didn't add up. The holes in the story were too big. Little coincidences that occurred around that time put everything in perfect focus. When she told me about it, I lost all feelings for her. I just went numb, didn't even get angry. I'm done. Just working on my exit strategy at this point. Getting financials in order, finding a place to move into, etc. It really sucks that she would be willing to throw away 19 years of marriage with no regard for anything, including our 2 children. Update. Sorry in advance. This is a long one. A lot has happened since my first post. She is in full-blown panic mode. Recently, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder where her white blood cells attack her lungs. This causes asthma attacks that normal medication can't correct. The only drug on the market that controls the condition has a copay of $13,000 after her Medicaid. If I didn't have really good health insurance through my employment, there wouldn't be any possibility of her being able to afford it. She has been trying everything to reconcile. She even set up couples counseling. We made it through 2.5 sessions. This explains why she came clean on partial truth and wanted to fix things. Counseling went the way I figured it would. Every session was all about everything I had done ever, including my working 50 hours each week to make ends meet because she has partial disability and didn't work. I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Everything was brought up, including our 2 children. Well, except I was informed that the mention of her date night was off limits. About halfway through the 3rd session, the counselor looked her in the eye and asked, "If you have such a high power radar to detect what everyone else is doing wrong, point that radar at yourself and tell me what you do wrong." The proverbial shit hit the fan. My soon-to-be ex-wife started yelling at the counselor and wanted to know why she was attacking her when we were there so she could fix me. After a few minutes of back and forth, my soon-to-be ex-wife stormed out crying. The counselor told me that my soon-to-be ex-wife had a deep hatred for me, and that she didn't think this marriage could be salvaged. Basically, my response was yep and nope. I informed the counselor that I appreciated her time, and we wouldn't be back. She offered me individual counseling. I informed her that I probably would need it in the future, and proceeded to tell her about the taboo topic. Needless to say, it didn't surprise her and confirmed my suspicion. Needless to say, the entire trip back to the house was about what a quack the therapist was. I've basically been on autopilot whenever I'm at the house. I refer to it as the house because it isn't a home anymore. I've moved into the spare bedroom. As far as I'm concerned, I may be married, but I no longer have a wife. If she didn't need good medical insurance coverage, she would still be on the hunt. I don't need to track down T to get the whole story. I live in a small community of less than 900 people. I commute to work in a bigger city daily. Monday of this week, while at the only grocery store in the community, guess who ran into my soon-to-be ex-wife? None other than the blind date guy. Small towns, right? It was bound to happen. I was at the end of the aisle when he walked up to her. He was a small guy, maybe 5'9" and 150 pounds. She had her back to me and didn't realize where I was. He asked her out again right in front of me. She did decline though. That's when I walked up. I asked him if he was the guy she went out with about 2 months ago. He asked me what it was to me. I backed him up against the shelves and told him that I had been her husband for 19 years. I thought it was going to soil himself. I'm 6'2" and 250 pounds and muscular. She tried to get me to back off. I grounded her to shut up, that she just better listen. Immediately she started crying. He told me that he was told she was single and begged for me not to kill him. I asked if they had sex. He swallowed hard and said yes. She cried harder. I told him to never let me see him again. He apologized for everything and basically ran out of the store. Her affair partner outed her by being in the wrong place at exactly the perfect time. If it hadn't been him, I would have eventually ran into tea to get the story. Needless to say, most of the time I'm on autopilot. It's as if all emotion is gone. I have to fake happiness while I'm with my children. I don't know if it is an emotional self-defense mechanism to keep things from falling further apart. I know I should be in some kind of distress over this. One day it's going to hit hard. I no longer trust the things I know to be true. Do my children really love me, or do they love the things I give them? Do my parents? Do they only love the fact that I got good grades in school? Never got into trouble? Always had good paying jobs? The only thing I'm certain of is I can't stay in this sham of a marriage. I get up, go to work, barely eat or sleep. The only people I've told about this are strangers on the internet. I have no one to talk to about this. I go from one day to the next pretending I'm normal. Maybe my soon-to-be ex-wife was right. The therapist does need to fix me. OP. Here are my thoughts on the situation. You need to go to a therapist for yourself. The process of divorce is going to get hard, and trust me, it will be helpful, even if asking for advice on how to minimize the impact on your children. You also need to seek a lawyer and focus on the best interests for your children. Let's see what the comments had to say about the situation. I'm stunned, said the therapist handled her like a pro. I'm sure she has seen plenty of women that do exactly what your wife did. It's very typical for a woman to blame the wreck of a marriage on the faults of her husband, while acting like her shit doesn't stink. Their girlfriends buy it, so why wouldn't the female counselor buy it? And of course her actual cheating is understood to be something she's not talking about as a condition of going to therapy with you. In other words, she conspired with you to support her lying by omission, while presumably walking in for help to make the marriage better. It's laughable and makes it crystal clear that your soon-to-be ex-wife is dishonest and not really about working on the marriage. The fact that the therapist let your soon-to-be ex-wife list the long laundry list of faults and then turned it back around on her was classic. And so was the soon-to-be ex-wife's stunned reaction, since it's a female therapist, that she presumes will be all girl code. LOL. Her medical condition is irrelevant. Her bringing another man into the marriage is the salient point. She brought him in willingly and was excited about it. Her falling out with T was the only reason you ever found out at all. And her confession was trickle truth, which simply means she'll lie to your face just like she'll lie to a therapist's face. Worse, she absolutely trashed you with the therapist in front of you. Imagine what she says to her friends, family, and whomever else will listen to her garbage. Your soon-to-be ex-wife has little character and integrity, and does not sound like someone that is actually reconciliation material. So don't offer it. Let her go. Now let's get into today's second story. I married the love of my life a year ago. We've been together for over 10 years and recently decided to start trying for kids. However, after trying a bit, we decided to wait until after the new year. This is what happened to me. We both were off early by chance and arrived home at the same time. Since it was nice and early in the afternoon, we decided to go on a hike before dinner. But before, we figured a shower would be nice. She showered first, and when I got out of the shower, I found her still naked in the bed. We had passionate and good sex and didn't even make the run after all because of pillow talk. We had dinner, and afterwards we sat on the couch next to each other, cozy with a blanket. She is a massive fan of some TV shows which I don't care for, so I sat with a laptop and watched Netflix at the same time. While she was watching TV, she was texting her friends. We were often like that, but after the lovely afternoon we were sitting extra close to each other. She didn't realize, however, that when my episode finished, I could easily see her mobile screen and see what she was typing. I saw my name in her text and that she was feeling so guilty that she couldn't remember the first time. But the second time was my fault. I got some grasps of information but was not entirely sure what was up, but something was wrong. She locked her phone and I closed my laptop at the same time. She froze up like a deer in headlights. I asked her if she wanted to tell me anything. I got up and walked out of the door. Normally, she wouldn't like that in an argument, but she didn't even move. A 15-minute walk and 3 cigarettes later, she still hadn't called or texted me, and because of this I knew the shit was real. It was so unlike her. I walked back home and she smiled at me as I came in. I turned towards the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of whiskey and another of the red wine bottle she was drinking and walked back. She held up her wine glass and I poured a good full glass and did the same for my whiskey. The faint hope in her eyes disappeared when she realized that I really did know. She told the entire story. The first time was when we hosted a party together at our place and I had to go to a family emergency and stay overnight. There was a new random friend that stayed late, even after everyone left. She was hammered and said she couldn't remember much except that it happened. The second time was the Tuesday night thereafter. She said she was confused about what happened and wanted to meet him at his place. She lied to me, saying she was going to meet another girlfriend that night and went off. And then it kind of happened again and the fault was hers because it was her decision to go there, which I didn't really get. After that, she broke it off and she was feeling terribly guilty. She didn't want me to leave and was terribly sorry, etc. The talk continued after that, but that is the gist. We spent the night apart and I asked her to find another place for the night while I thought. That's this morning as I'm writing this. Oh man, for all the people still reading all of this, I'm sorry for the wall of text. I think this is just some therapeutic writing for me. Do with it what you want. I just had to get it off my chest. I'm going to take my time thinking on what to do and see it from there. OP, your wife obviously has no respect for you. Do you honestly believe her sob story? You need to file for divorce immediately so you can get out of this relationship. You can also try to record everything she's saying. It will make things a lot easier for you in court. I wish you the best of luck with your situation. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's story, OP's wife got disowned by her entire family after she had the nerve to show up to the hospital her grandfather was at with her affair partner. Now the wife's life is a complete wreck, and she's stuck with her affair partner who is a deadbeat and has a crappy life. Let's get into today's story. Wife cheated on me and we are divorcing. Hurt and confused. I'll start by saying that at this point, I know my only option here is to go through with the divorce and leave my soon-to-be ex-wife for reasons which will be very clear, but I'm still reeling from the pain she put me through and I'm very lost at the moment. Some backstory. I met my soon-to-be ex-wife when I was 17 and she was 16. We started dating in early 2016 and hit it off. From there, we quickly escalated into seeing each other all the time and working together. Eventually, I moved in with her family and stayed with them for a good 2 years. During this time, I fell in love with my soon-to-be ex-wife. She came off as confident, feisty, and caring. It always felt like she had always done whatever it took to make her family and me happy. Just as well, I became very close with her family and know her sister's mother and grandmother very well as a few of her cousins and uncles. Of course, living together at a young age probably wasn't the best decision and we did fight. A lot of it had to do with the fact that I was living with her family, but of course working for $10 an hour part-time is no way to move out or even get a vehicle. Of course, I tried my best to keep her happy, going as far as to keep changing jobs and pulling out loans, but it would always be something between us. We did love each other, I know that, but she would be constantly upset that we still lived with the family. Eventually, we split up in 2018 and didn't see each other for about 8 months. She took it very hard at first, but I was adamant that we had a toxic relationship and needed a break. During this time, she dated other men and worked on her career. As for me, I enrolled in college where I am about to earn my associates, and I'm taking work seriously and have now landed my dream job as of last week as a result of this. I want to make this clear because I feel we both bettered ourselves and became more mature people during our time apart, and is one of the reasons why I wanted to try with her again. Another thing to remember is that during all of this, her family as well as mine still continued to hope we would work things out. Yes, even as she dated other people, which we thankfully did. We reconciled and got an apartment together, and eventually got married in December of 2019. I was so happy I cried in front of all of our family, and even now thinking about it makes me want to cry. First, things were great. Sex was amazing, we communicated fairly well, and continued to pursue our individual careers. However, it was after we both got new jobs that our relationship changed. Back in July of this year, I got a job as a correctional officer at a detainment center near where I live. It was hard. My anxiety was off the charts and I had regular panic attacks daily. My soon-to-be ex-wife, on the other hand, had just been in a car accident with her brand new truck where it was totaled and was, of course, hurt by it. Needless to say, we had trouble. Her seemingly normal caring attitude became one of bitterness and anger. When I would talk to her about my anxiety, she would tell me things like, "You need to get over it, or you're a grown man, stop crying, or you're being a bee." Things like that, and it was very hurtful. I tried to be available to her as well, but working constant 12-hour shifts and overtime made that hard. And yes, we fought. Never violent, but we would talk for hours about the same things over and over. Despite this, I still felt my soon-to-be ex-wife loved me and was just going through a lot. I eventually did conquer my anxiety and moved on and now work my dream job in IT. However, my soon-to-be ex-wife started getting closer to another coworker to cope. At least that's what I assume. At first, it was innocent enough, just working together, texting, the occasional call, and it never bothered me. Then, she escalated things and started seeing him every day after work for breakfast. She works nights and seeing him constantly. She would ask me not to talk when she was on the phone with him because then he wouldn't talk, as she said. I didn't like it, but I trusted my wife nonetheless. Eventually, I confronted her about the relationship, to which she said they were just friends. However, she would not text me, ignored my calls, and sometimes would stay the night without letting me know. This all came to a head when she stayed all day and night with him and didn't come home or communicate at all. She admitted that she didn't see my calls the next morning, but only after pushing did some other details come out. From what I understand, she not only ignored my calls but got drunk with him as well as other people who were there. She apparently tried to walk out naked, to which he supposedly pulled her by the arm violently and told her, "Don't be an effing stupid, what are you doing?" Supposedly, she didn't see my calls because he put her phone on silent, to which he denies doing. She still claims till this day that they didn't sleep together, but of course I don't believe it. I tried for about 2 days to ask her to be honest with me and cut off contact with this man, but she refused, almost crying when I asked her to and saying he'd be hurt by that. I felt hurt and was angry that she could just leave me behind so easily, so I left and stayed at my parents' for a week. She did text me constantly asking for me to come home, but I kept telling her to cut contact with him, to which she didn't. She even tried faking it but still contacted him. I know this because I paid her phone bill and would see his number on there constantly. I eventually did come back to her under the pretense we would work something out, but that's where things went downhill. In that 1 week I was gone. She got a brand new truck with him, pulled out a $10,000 loan with him, and even opened a utility bill for him under her name. In addition, he was at our apartment constantly and she stayed with him constantly. I was hurt, but, and I regret this very much, still tried to work things out. That was perhaps the hardest week of my life. My soon-to-be ex-wife, someone who I had loved and been with for years, told me she doesn't love me and never loved me. Said me asking her to be with me was pathetic and that I disgusted her. I was broken. I wanted to end my life. I called her mom. Her husband cheated on her and asked for advice. I know this was wrong, but I had no one to turn to and felt more alone than I had ever been. Eventually, I permanently moved back in with my parents and told her I was leaving for good. Suddenly, her attitude changed and she said she wanted me back and didn't want to lose me. I was happy and regretfully talked to her. This lasted only for 1 night. Again, I tried to ask her why she felt the need to cheat instead of talking to me about it, but she got angry, saying I needed to let it go and move on already. Keep in mind, it had only been 1 day since she admitted to cheating. It's not perfect, and I feel anyone else in my situation would have wanted honesty and closure too. Her family agrees on this as well, and has tried talking to her to only be told the same things. This on-off relationship we had continued for a week with her just constantly saying I don't know what I want. She blamed me for the cheating, saying it was because I left and she had no choice, to which I called BS. The last time I spoke with her was Sunday, October 24th, and it did not go well. Her grandfather is currently in the hospital, and I went to support the family. She showed up in the truck with this man and her entire family was upset. Me, her sister, and her sister's boyfriend sat and talked with my soon-to-be ex-wife and this man, and he blew us off and treated it like a joke, saying things just happened and that's why he is with my soon-to-be ex-wife, saying he knows we don't like him yet constantly disrespecting us. My soon-to-be ex-wife meanwhile barely said a word and let him mock us and lie to us. Eventually, her sister, who wanted me to keep trying to talk to my soon-to-be ex-wife, told me she wasn't worth it and disowned her right in front of me. My soon-to-be ex-wife now blames me for this, saying it's my fault her family doesn't like her anymore, and that they'll never accept this guy because of me, and that was that. I stayed with the family for a while, and they all told me they loved me and felt sorry for me and didn't understand how she could do this, but that they supported me no matter what. Now for the kicker. So a little info about this guy. He is 39 years old. Yeah, that's right. From what I can understand, he is manipulative, abusive, and doesn't like for her to see me or her family. I have not seen him hurt her, but I have heard him over the phone cuss at her and tell her inappropriate things. When me or her family do get in contact with her, he will purposely be loud over the phone, chime in with nonsense, and constantly talk over her. Very childish things. She had admitted that he purposely eggs me on in the hopes that I will do something so he can get me arrested. This man also has a daughter my soon-to-be ex-wife's age and still finds it okay. Needless to say, he's no good. Throughout all of this, I have experienced a roller coaster of emotions. I feel inadequate, a lot, hurt, scared, and angry. I don't understand why my soon-to-be ex-wife cheated on me, and why with someone who abuses her. Yet, I still feel like I want her and want to help her. I know that's a fantasy now, but I can't help it. I'm also afraid of if maybe she's right. What do you guys think? Am I wrong for being hurt by her cheating? Do I manipulate her family by going to them for support? Is this all my fault like my wife says? I just don't know. TLDR, soon-to-be ex-wife cheated with a 39-year-old man and blames me, and says I manipulated her family into hating her. Did he do something wrong? Edit. Wife soon-to-be ex-wife, past tense. Update. I have filed for divorce paperwork, and it has been accepted by the court. I am making arrangements to have the papers served while she's at work. Some people are asking and wondering about assets, my legal responsibility, with what she's got going on with her affair partner. We have nothing together. Nothing. Our banks, vehicles, anything of significant value is separate, so there should be no need or risk of me losing anything. Additionally, the things she's co-signing with her affair partner do not have my name listed or otherwise mentioned at all, so I have no legal standing there either. As for the phone bill, it's under my name. I simply cut her line. I have contacted her family and let them know I am taking a step back from them for now, which they agree is the best solution. As of right now, I'm seeing all of this with a much clearer head, and I'm happier even now without her. Being with my family again is great as well. They're incredibly happy to have me at the house again, and I'm happy to have positive company around for change. Once all the paperwork is served and ready, I simply need to wait out the waiting period and can finalize everything. Thank you all so much for the advice. It's been a wild ride, but I know things can only get better from here. Wow, what a great story. I'm happy for you, OP, that you were able to get out of that absolute train wreck of a situation with your life. The fact that she had the nerve to bring her affair partner to the hospital her grandfather was at is absolutely disturbing, and shows that cheaters are willing to do whatever it takes to have what they want. Karma has served you much justice here, that after that happened you didn't need to do anything else other than serve her with divorce papers. Not only did you see her true colors, but her family also did too. Since you have nothing else tied to her financially, I would recommend you move on and cut ties. Her life is a wreck, and her consequences are now something she will have to live with for the rest of her life. She has completely destroyed her relationship with you and her family for the sake of her affair partner. Now let's see what some of the commenters had to say. Tercer78 starts us off. There's a lot going on here, so let me be blunt. This marriage is dead. Nothing you say or do will get it back. The woman you fell in love with no longer exists. The sooner you cut her off and move on from everyone, the sooner you can find happiness. This means even dropping her family. Your ex has serious mental health issues and is now stuck in an abusive relationship, but so are you. You can't help her and she most definitely isn't interested in helping you. So cut all ties and move on to healthier and happier endeavors. There is no more happiness here for you. Grieve the loss of the woman you knew and focus on much healthier relationships, and even let her family go, as hard as it is, because you need to move on to happier times and they help trigger the sadness. Non-organic has a comment too. Listen to me, it is over. If you care about yourself at all, you have to accept that. Move on. That includes from her family. You have to completely detach. Even if this guy were to dump your wife and she came crawling back to you, there will be another him eventually. Your wife is a mess and she can't respect you because she treats you horribly, yet you stick around like a puppy waiting to be kicked. I know I'm being harsh, but you may need it. You are 22 years old. You had no business getting married that young anyway. Go no contact with your wife and no contact with her family. File for divorce and live the next 50+ years free of this loon. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as comment on what your thoughts are about today's story. I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark. I hope you all are having a wonderful day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him after his Apple Watch showed she was at AP's house after claiming she was at her mother's. Ope then showed up and confronted her and things got crazy. Now her life is a complete wreck. Let's get into today's story to find out what happened. My wife and I got married in 2018. I worked as a paralegal and started my own side business, and when she got pregnant, I bought a house in her family's city and eventually lost my job. So from 2018 to 2020, I was essentially in grind mode, working a low-paying job and hitting major hours of overtime each week just to make sure the house, wife, and child were secured. 80,105 hours per week. During this time she was not working. She said she was, but in 2019, I learned she was not and was staying at her parents' house in order to make it seem that she was working. In 2019 to 2020, my business began to grow and started to match my day job's income, so I stopped working overtime. She got a job at a factory and she was happy to finally make her own money. We didn't have sex a lot because of the kids and stress. At the end of 2021, I got my first major business contract, $250,000, and I was extremely happy because months before this, we were forced to give our newborn baby up for adoption because we simply could not afford it. She has 3 kids from her last marriage plus 1 with me, plus I have 1 of my own that I get half the year. With 5 kids and a 2-bedroom house and both of our cars, both 12 years old and reading 200 on the odometer, it just wasn't plausible for me to be able to carry all the expenses for the year or two while she recovered and prepared to return to work. In 2022, I doubled my business income, $500,000, and took her on trips/vacations every few months. I stayed home with the kids and was a great father. I told her she didn't have to work anymore, but she insisted on working because she liked her job and didn't want to have to ask me for money. So I essentially was a stay-at-home father, cooking, cleaning, and watching the children, but I still paid for all the bills, mortgages, and cars. I even employed her brother that came from prison, and paid her sister's college tuition. We still never had sex and she began working longer hours. In September, some girl messaged me saying she worked with my wife at the factory and said she was cheating on me and texting guys. I confronted my wife. She denied it and even told me I could drive her to and from work to prove it. So for 4 weeks I drove her to and from work. While I drove her, she went to work later. She usually was gone from 4 a.m. 7 p.m., but now it was 6 a.m. 5 p.m. The first week of October, I stopped and she began leaving at 3 a.m. and coming back at 8 p.m. On October 23rd, she said she was going to work on Friday, they always have Friday off, and that she would sleep at her parents' house because our son was sick, implying she picked him up from his cousin's slumber party, and that her other sister's car wouldn't start, and so she was letting her use her SUV tonight, and that her phone was going to die because she had no charger. Obviously that was about 40 red flags, so I immediately tracked her Apple Watch. Her phone was off and checked her parents' and sister's houses. She wasn't there and they hadn't heard from her. The children were still with their cousins at the slumber party too. I went to the location of the Apple Watch and knocked on the door. No answer. I walked to the backyard. It was a 1-bedroom trap house with a fence knocked over, and went to the window and saw her phone and watch laying here next to her, and what looked to be another person next to her in bed. I knocked on the window and began recording with my phone. Her affair partner hopped out of bed fully naked and yelled at me after whispering something in her ear. He said he would fight, so I went up front to wait for him and put my pistol away in my car. He never came. So I left, and the following day I told her parents and family everything and showed the video to them. They disowned her. She stayed at that guy's house from Thursday night until Saturday night. I still had access to her Apple account and saw her messages to the guy saying that she would stand by him, to come back and eat her food, that she would clean his house for him, that she would perform sexual acts, etc. She refused to do any of this for me, said she was not a slave, etc. Sunday he kicked her out of his house after getting tired of having sex with her. So she crawled back to my house. I changed all the locks and all her belongings were bagged up and outside. She stayed outside for 5 hours before she got my son, and made him wait with her out in the cold. So I let them in. I didn't speak with her until Tuesday. She said she only slept with him one time, that they worked together and had been talking for a week. She did it because I didn't show her love. They had been friends on Facebook since July, and her brother confirmed that he had been to his house to drop off food several times with my wife but didn't know who lived there. She said there were 2 other guys she talked to at her work, but that she only sent them nudes but never got physical. Despite trying to hook up 5 times this year, they never were able to. She said they all didn't have a car, so she gave them money and rides to and from work. She promised that was all her cheating and that she never cheated before this year. The next day I messaged 10 men who she worked with and had as friends on Facebook and offered them $500 cash to admit and provide concrete proof of her affair with them. One responded and showed photos of her meeting him at a hotel on August 10, 2020 when she was sick. Another said he had no proof but admitted to having sex with her in 2019 a few times and was able to verify her tattoos. Other men did not respond. She denied that anything had happened before this month, that this was the first time she got physical, and that the other times were just sexting, which she didn't see as cheating, and she only did it because I didn't show her love or attention. She begged to make it work to give her another chance and said she would quit her factory job and be a stay-at-home mom. Made me laugh that she thought I would reward her with that. I told her to stay working and save up to move out by my birthday in December, that I would file for a divorce and that she could have the house. She signed a prenup, so she had no claim to the business. She said she would kill herself before losing me, and that she still loved me. I told her I didn't feel anything for her, and that beyond my son I didn't care about her or her other kids. I don't want a used wife, even though I understand what made her cheat. If she cheated because I didn't show her attention while I was working long hours building a secure foundation for our family, I already know I won't be able to show her any kind of love without remembering all the men she had sex with in the past, present, and future. Opie, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. It's seeming like no good deed goes unpunished. You pretty much did everything right and got what you did not deserve in return. I don't see any alternative other than to divorce. Even though she has lied about how many times she cheated, forgive her, yet I would not trust her going forward. Divorce is the only option I see here. By the way, her excuse that because of you overworking to see that she and your children were financially stable was absolutely no excuse for her cheating. She claims you neglected to show her love and affection. Did she ever come to you and initiate any love and affection? Set her out with the trash she belongs with. Now let's get into today's second story. So my wife and this guy have been coworkers and friends for over a year now. They mostly work together but sometimes talk via text and Snapchat. He is 26 and she is 33. I'm 37. He lives in his parents' basement and has a part-time job at the company and no real financial future. He is also not very attractive and doesn't seem like my wife's type. Anyway, her boss at work had a birthday on Saturday, and I dropped her off at the bar where a bunch of other employees were going to celebrate. I fell asleep on the couch at around 1 a.m. and woke up at 6 a.m. the following day. I'm not sure why, but I had a bad feeling about her not coming home before I was awake, so I looked through her phone and found Snapchats, which made my heart sink. She messaged him at 2:30 a.m. and said he's asleep. After I found the texts, I took some photos and woke her up and confronted her. She came clean, admitting to it all after I showed her the photos, and said that they didn't have sex because he was too drunk to get hard, but they fooled around and planned/tried to. She claimed this is the first time they ever got physical, but I am not sure I believe it, since from the text they had clearly discussed it, as they both knew what they were talking about. I'm now trying to decide if I want to divorce or reconcile. I had an initial consultation with a lawyer today. We own a house together that neither of us can afford on our own and have 2 kids ages 6 and 4. I'm looking for advice or support from this community. Do you think I can keep this relationship alive? She has agreed to go zero contact. Give me full access to her phone and enter counseling. I also told her that she needed to inform her parents or I would, and she called them both immediately after. I'm not sure why I did this. I guess I wanted her to own it, and I wanted her parents, who I both respect very much, to know why I would be divorcing her if I choose that path. Update. So I'm relatively new to Reddit and have never made a post before this one. So I'm not sure if this is the proper way to update, but here goes. I read most of the comments here and thank you for your advice. I met with a lawyer yesterday and took home the client intake form, which I filled out in front of her shortly after. I have my first consultation with a lawyer in 2 weeks, as that was their earliest appointment. She has been very remorseful and has done everything I have asked of her so far. She also said she wanted to prove to me that this was a one-time mistake but didn't know how. Then I saw that some people suggested a lie detector test, so I brought that up to her. She agreed to take it and asked to do it sooner than later, so I called today on my lunch break and scheduled one for Friday. The questions will basically cover what happened the night in question, whether they have ever done anything previously to that, and whether or not there have been any other partners during our marriage. If she fails any questions on the test, I will not attempt reconciliation, and even if she passes them all, I still may not. This is all too fresh and my emotions are too high to make any decisions at this point in time. The only decisions I've made are things she must do for me to even consider reconciliation. In terms of the AP, they work for the same company but do not work at the same store, and have no day-to-day interactions at work. I am not making excuses for her, and am not trying to diminish the disrespect she has given me or my family. Does anyone have any experience with lie detectors? I'm assuming I can't be the only person here who has had a spouse take one. Also, I do not wish to talk to her HR and make her lose her job. If she has no wages if we divorce, I do not want to have to pay support. Our incomes are slightly similar, with mine being higher, and if some way in hell we do try to work it out, I will also need her financial help to maintain the household. You have done all the right things so far. You have consulted with a lawyer, so you can begin to understand your options and what divorce and custody would entail. Make sure to ask the lawyer how to separate and protect financial assets, including joint accounts and credit cards. You were also smart to get her to tell the truth to her parents, so she cannot spin this differently if you end up divorcing. This is not their first rodeo. It seems like it's been going on for a while. She got comfortable and careless and you found out. Let the minimizing and blame games and gaslighting begin. Why else would he presume a married woman would have condoms to have sex with him? Be honest first and foremost with yourself, knowing she has lied, treated you like a dummy, and disrespected you in the most primal of ways. You think you can live with her. Also, she will lose what little respect she has for you, and she will do it again. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on today's stories. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. The setting sun spilled orange hues through the blinds, casting long shadows across the living room where I sat, my mind a swirl of disbelief and anger. It was just another ordinary day until my phone buzzed with a message from Dave, an old buddy from college. "Hey man, saw something odd, thought you should know," the message read. I called him immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. "Jake, I saw Lizzie at the cafe downtown." Dave's voice was hesitant. "She was with some guy, looked cozy, didn't seem like a work thing." My world stopped. Lizzie, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, in a cafe with another man? It couldn't be true. I confronted her that night. She walked in, her hair slightly disheveled, a flush to her cheeks. She was beautiful as always, but something in her eyes flickered when she saw the look on my face. "Lizzie, are you seeing someone else?" My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. There was a pause, a moment suspended in time, where I hoped it was all a misunderstanding. But then she said it, her voice cold and detached. "Yes, I am. It's my boss, Mark. And I won't stop." I couldn't believe it. The woman I loved, the one I shared my dreams in bed with, was telling me she was having an affair. And she wasn't sorry. There was no apology, no tears, just a blunt confession. "What about us, Lizzie? What about our marriage?" I was grasping at straws, trying to find some sliver of the woman I married in her eyes. Our marriage? Jake, I need more. I need excitement, passion. You just don't get it. That night I left. I packed a bag with shaking hands, my mind a blur of memories and broken dreams. Walking out of our shared home, I felt a mix of freedom and guilt. Freedom from a lie I had been living, and guilt for not seeing it sooner. The street was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps that cast long shadows on the pavement. I walked without direction, my steps echoing in the quiet night. I had loved her with all my heart. But in that moment I realized love wasn't always enough. As I wandered through the streets, my mind replayed our years together. The laughter, the fights, the quiet moments, and the loud ones. All of it felt like a distant dream, shattered by the harsh reality of her betrayal. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. The life I knew, the life I loved, was over. And in its place was a gaping hole, filled with questions, doubts, and the overwhelming pain of betrayal. That night marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. A chapter where I was alone, thrust into an unfamiliar world without the person I thought would be by my side forever. But sometimes you need to lose everything to find out who you really are. And this was my beginning. The day Lizzie moved out, the house felt strangely empty, like someone had sucked the air out of it. I watched from the window as she loaded her things into her car, her movements swift and determined. There wasn't any of the hesitation you might expect from someone leaving their life behind. It was as if she was eager to start anew without me. I wasn't surprised when I heard about her job promotion a few weeks later. Mark, her boss, and now the reason for our broken marriage, had always favored her. I could imagine them in the office, her laughing at his jokes, him gazing at her with that look men have when they're more than just interested. Stung, but not in the way it used to. It was more of a dull, constant ache, a reminder of what was lost. With the new job came a new Lizzie. She traded her modest sedan for a sleek sports car, one that roared down the street as she drove away from what used to be our home. Her clothes became more expensive, her nights out more frequent. Through the grapevine of mutual friends, I heard about her parties, her trips to exotic places, her name on VIP lists at clubs. It was a lifestyle she had always craved but never had with me. But as her life became more lavish, her circle of friends started shrinking. Our old friends, the ones we used to have game nights with, slowly distanced themselves. I'd see them occasionally, and the look in their eyes was a mix of pity and discomfort. They didn't know how to talk about Lizzie, or maybe they didn't want to. She had become a taboo topic, a ghost haunting our conversations. The news of her engagement to Mark came as a rumor at first. I was grabbing a coffee when I overheard someone at the next table. "Did you hear about Lizzie and her boss? Engaged already, can you believe it?" The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Engaged. The word echoed in my mind as I walked back home, the coffee forgotten and growing cold in my hand. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, to shout at the injustice of it all. Another part of me, a quieter, more resigned part, was just tired. Tired of the drama, the pain, the constant reminders of a life that was no longer mine. That night I sat in my living room, the silence enveloping me. The walls were lined with pictures of happier times, mocking me with memories of a past that felt like a different life. I realized then that it wasn't just Lizzie who had moved out. It was the laughter, the love, the warmth. All of it gone, leaving behind nothing but empty spaces. As I looked around, I knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter. One where I had to learn who I was without Lizzie. It was a daunting thought, but in that vast, echoing silence, I found a glimmer of something like hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find myself again in the ruins of what we had. Maybe in the end that was what I needed all along. After Lizzie left, the months blurred into a mosaic of routine and solitude. Life without her was a quiet hum, uneventful and monotonous. But her life, as I heard through hushed conversations and second-hand stories, was anything but. She dove into wedding planning with a fervor that surprised even those who knew her well. Lizzie had always loved the finer things, and her wedding was shaping up to be a spectacle. I heard about the lavish venue, the designer dress, the guest list that read like a who's who of the city's elite. It seemed like she was living in a dream, a fairy tale spun from silk and diamonds. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings. As the wedding drew closer, whispers reached my ears about the friends she was losing. The same friends who had shared our dinner table, laughed at our jokes, were now turning their backs on her. They couldn't reconcile the Lizzie they knew with the woman who had betrayed her husband and flaunted her affair. In their place, a new crowd gathered around her. People drawn to the glitz and glamour, to the allure of scandal. I saw pictures of her online, always smiling, always surrounded by these new friends. But her eyes, once bright with genuine joy, now held a glint of something else. Desperation, maybe, or loneliness. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life in a way I never expected. I started focusing more on my hobbies, got back in touch with old friends, even began dating again. It wasn't easy, moving on from the wreckage of a failed marriage, but I was finding moments of happiness in the unlikeliest of places. When Lizzie heard about my new life, I wondered how she felt. Did she regret her decisions? Did she envy the simple, honest happiness I was finding? I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd asked about me, her voice tinged with something that sounded like regret. Then came her wedding day. A day that should have been perfect. But it wasn't. The disaster struck out of nowhere, like a storm on a clear day. The lavish venue she had booked went bankrupt just days before the wedding. The news spread like wildfire. A juicy piece of gossip for those who thrived on schadenfreude. The wedding was hastily moved to a lesser venue, one that lacked the opulence Lizzie had so desired. Guests murmured, the glamour of the event tarnished by the last-minute change. I heard about it from a friend, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of something. Not happiness certainly, but not sadness either. It was a complex mix of emotions, a reminder of the life we once dreamed of together, now just a faded echo. That day, as Lizzie walked down the aisle in a less grandiose setting, with fewer friends and a crowd of strangers, I found myself at a small cafe, the sun warm on my face, a faint smile on my lips. Life had taken us on divergent paths that once intertwined but were now worlds apart. In that moment, sipping my coffee and watching the world go by, I realized something important. Happiness isn't found in the grand gestures or the lavish parties. It's in the small, quiet moments, the ones that pass unnoticed if you're not careful. And as Lizzie said her vows in a setting far removed from her dreams, I hoped she would find that happiness too, in her own way, on her own path. Months had passed since Lizzie's wedding. The glitz and glamour of the big day had faded, replaced by the reality of a marriage built on shaky ground. I heard bits and pieces about her life with Mark through mutual friends, and none of it sounded like the happy ending she had envisioned. Their troubles began early, the honeymoon phase barely lasting. Mark, who had once showered her with affection and gifts, had become distant and preoccupied. Lizzie, accustomed to being the center of attention, struggled with the sudden change. She'd call me sometimes, under the guise of discussing some leftover joint financial matter, but her voice often betrayed her loneliness and frustration. Then came the financial troubles. Their lavish lifestyle, funded by two incomes that seemed limitless, hit a snag. I heard that Mark's business was in trouble, and the luxurious trips, the fancy dinners, and the high-end shopping sprees became a source of contention. Lizzie, who had never been good with money, found herself in a web of credit card debts and unpaid bills. The strain on their marriage was palpable, even from a distance. Then whispers of infidelity began to surface. Lizzie had always been possessive, and now, insecure in her tumultuous marriage, she grew paranoid. She suspected Mark of having an affair, her trust eroded by the foundation of their own relationship and affair. One evening they had a heated argument at a restaurant, a place I used to go to with Lizzie. It was a high-end exclusive place, the kind where everyone knew everyone. Word got around quickly. She accused him of seeing someone else, her voice rising with every word, drawing the attention of the entire restaurant. Mark, calm and collected, denied everything, but the damage was done. The scene ended with Lizzie storming out, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. That public spectacle was the talk of the town for days. Friends who were there told me how embarrassed she looked, how people whispered and pointed. Lizzie, who had always cared so much about appearances, had her private life exposed for all to see. After that incident, her calls to me stopped. I could only imagine the turmoil she was going through. A part of me felt sorry for her. Despite everything, I remembered the good times we had shared, the dreams we had built together. But another part of me knew this was the inevitable outcome of the choices she had made. Sitting in my quiet living room, far removed from the chaos of Lizzie's world, I reflected on how our lives had diverged. We had started on the same path, but somewhere along the way we had taken different turns. Her path had led her to a world of glitz but little substance, a house of cards waiting to collapse. Mine had been quieter, less dramatic, but in many ways more fulfilling. Life, I realized, is about choices. The choices we make define us, shape our paths, and determine our happiness. And sometimes the pursuit of something more, something better, leads us away from what truly matters. I hoped, for Lizzie's sake, that she would find her way back to what was real and meaningful, but I knew that was a journey she would have to make on her own. It's strange how life can turn on a dime. One minute you're up, the next you're spiraling down so fast it makes your head spin. That's what happened to Lizzie, my ex, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with. The beginning of her downfall started with an old flame. I heard from mutual friends, ones who still talk to me anyway, that her first love, a guy from her college days, had reappeared. They started meeting in secret, rekindling what they had lost years ago. Lizzie, already struggling in her marriage, seemed to be searching for something. A piece of her past, maybe, or an escape from her present. But secrets have a way of coming out. Mark, her husband, caught them. I don't know the details, but I can imagine the scene, the shock, the anger, the sense of betrayal. It wasn't long after that he filed for divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their marriage had begun with an affair, and now was ending because of another. Their divorce turned messy real quick. There was a bitter dispute over assets. The house, the cars, the savings, everything was up for grabs. Lizzie, who had once lived for luxury, found herself fighting to keep a semblance of the lifestyle she was accustomed to. Around the same time, she lost her job. The scandal of her affair and the divorce had reached her workplace. In a world where reputation is everything, hers was tarnished beyond repair. She tried to put on a brave face, but I knew she was struggling. The high-flying executive, once the talk of the town for her success, was now the subject of pitying glances and gossip. Then came the isolation. The friends who had flocked to her side during her days of glamour started to drift away. In their place was a gaping void of loneliness. The reality hit her hard. When you're up, everyone wants to be your friend. But when you're down, that's when you see who's real and who's not. Desperate to maintain her lifestyle, Lizzie resorted to questionable means. I heard rumors, nothing concrete, but whispers of dodgy deals, of debts to the wrong kind of people. She was spiraling, grasping at straws to hold on to a life that was slipping away. Legal troubles soon followed. Something about fraud, again, I didn't know the details, but it was serious. The law caught up with her, and her once bright future seemed dimmer than ever. The final blow was the public exposure of her scandal. It was all over the news, social media, everywhere. The details of her affairs, her divorce, her legal troubles, all laid bare for the world to see. Lizzie, who had once thrived in the spotlight, was now its victim. Sitting in my quiet living room, a world away from the chaos of her life, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Lizzie and I had shared something real once before it all went wrong. But choices have consequences, and hers had caught up with her in the most devastating way. Her story, once a tale of success and glamour, had turned into a cautionary tale of loss and despair. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across my floor, I realized that life is a series of choices, and each one leads us down a path. Some paths lead to happiness, others to ruin. Lizzie's path had led her to a place of isolation and regret, a far cry from the bright future she once seemed destined for. I watched from a distance, a bystander to the drama that unfolded. Her court battle was the beginning of the end. Charged with fraud, she stood before a judge, her face a mask of fear and defiance. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Every eye was on her as the prosecutor laid out the case, painting a picture of deceit and desperation. The verdict was a blow that echoed through her life. Guilty. The word hung in the air, heavy with consequence. In the aftermath, her assets were seized. The luxury car, the designer clothes, the expensive jewelry, all taken as part of the legal proceedings. It was a swift, brutal stripping away of the life she had built. Public opinion, once her ally, now turned against her. The same people who had celebrated her success now reveled in her downfall. She became a social pariah, her name synonymous with scandal. The whispers and stares followed her everywhere, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. In her desperation, Lizzie tried to claw back some semblance of her former life. She attempted to mingle in social circles, but the doors that once opened so easily for her were now firmly shut. Her attempts were met with cold shoulders and turned backs. The world she once ruled had cast her out. Amidst the chaos, a new love interest entered her life. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. He was different from the others, or so she thought. He seemed to understand her, to accept her despite her tarnished reputation. But it was not to be. In a cruel twist of fate, he too betrayed her, leaving her more alone than ever. That was when she hit rock bottom. The realization of how far she had fallen was a painful awakening. The woman who once had everything now had nothing. Her home, once a symbol of her success, was lost to financial ruin. Evicted, she found herself with nowhere to go. Her belongings stuffed into boxes, a stark contrast to the life she once led. Even her family, who had stood by her through thick and thin, reached their breaking point. The strain of her legal troubles, the scandal, the public disgrace, it was too much. They distanced themselves, unable to bear the weight of her choices. And then came the health crisis, a scare that landed her in the hospital, alone and vulnerable. It was a stark reminder of her mortality, of the fragile thread that life hangs on. Sitting in my quiet house, the news of Lizzie's latest misfortune reached me. It was hard to reconcile the image of the vibrant, ambitious woman I had married with the broken figure she had become. I felt a pang of sadness, a remnant of the love we once shared. But it was tempered by the knowledge that her downfall was the result of her own choices, a path she had chosen to walk. Her story, once a tale of triumph, was now a cautionary tale of loss and regret. A reminder that the choices we make have consequences, that the pursuit of wealth and status can lead to ruin. In the end, Lizzie's fall from grace was a journey she walked alone, a journey that took her from the heights of success to the depths of despair. But the world wasn't done dealing her blows. The associates she had teamed up with, those she thought were her allies in this new venture, turned on her. They took her money, her ideas, and left her with nothing but broken promises. It was a betrayal that cut deep, leaving her more isolated than ever. In her desperation, she reached out to me. I got an email one day, her words a mix of apology, regret, and a plea for help. But for me it was too little, too late. The wounds of our past were still raw, the betrayal still fresh. I couldn't find it in me to offer her the support she sought. My response was brief, indifferent. A clear message that I had moved on. That was when she had her moment of clarity. It came to her, as these things often do, in the quiet of the night. She realized the extent of her wrongdoings, the pain she had caused, the bridges she had burned. But as is often the case, her realization came too late. Despite her newfound understanding, her situation continued to worsen. Debts piled up, her health deteriorated, and the few friends she had left drifted away. She was a ship adrift in a storm, battered by the waves of her own making. Then came the final blow, the legal verdict. The court found her guilty in a case related to her business dealings. It was the nail in the coffin of her attempts at redemption. The sentence was harsh, a reflection of the gravity of her crimes. It was a verdict that sealed her fate. Support, both moral and material, was minimal. The few who had once been close to her now kept their distance, unwilling or unable to be associated with her downfall. It was a lonely time for her, one where she had to face the consequences of her actions alone. The final loss came in the form of her beloved dog, a loyal companion that had been with her through thick and thin. The dog, sick and unable to be cared for by Lizzie in her current state, had to be given up. It was a heart-wrenching decision, one that left her feeling utterly bereft. In the end, Lizzie found herself alone and forgotten. The once successful, vibrant woman had become a shadow of her former self, isolated from the society that once adored her. Friends, family, colleagues all had turned their backs, leaving her to face her bleak future alone. Her story, once a tale of aspiration and achievement, ended in uncertainty. A future that once seemed so bright was now clouded with despair. Lizzie, who had once had it all, was left with nothing but her regrets and the haunting question of what might have been if only she had